receive that. So here's the key word. In order to have spiritual progress, what the scriptures are saying is not so much what you have to learn, because we have the ability and we have all that working within us. We literally have to develop ourselves so we can receive it, not reject it. The receptivity. So here Sri Ramana Maharshi, the great saint, said, when someone said, "Is grace true? Is it evident?" And he said, grace is there. Our job is to become receptive to it. So that's what we have to do, to become receptive to it. So I came across something this morning in the Uddhava Gita, which is the last teaching or the last communication of Sri Krishna. Of course, he gave the Bhagavad Gita, which we all know, to Arjuna. Just before Sri Krishna was about to leave his body, his disciple Uddhava, or Uddhava, some people say, he spoke. This is very similar to the Bhagavad Gita, but it is more clear. There's something, a few verses I want to read, because we want to try to understand how we can become more receptive to this divine essence within us, and also the receptivity, and start to perceive that divine consciousness moving in life around us. It's very interesting because this is chapter 15, where Sri Krishna is giving now a description of Jnana Yoga, the yoga of knowledge, which many people say the yoga of knowledge deals with that non-dualism, that there is no difference between us and the world and God, it's all God. And so therefore they say dealing with the mind is a waste of time, because there is no mind, it's all God. But if you look at the scriptures and you look at tradition, he's saying the preparation for Jnana Yoga, the preparation for the yoga of knowledge, is to control the mind and make it receptive. So when you do vichara, when you're doing a form of inquiry into the nature of the self, or reflection into the nature of the self, you've developed a one-pointed, concentrated mind. This is why even all the subsidiary aspects of Sanatana Dharma, even Hatha Yoga, the purpose of all this is to get the body flexible and get the body still and balanced, because the mind and body are connected. So when you have a body that's fluid, pliable, and still, the mind becomes fluid, pliable, and still. And this is the key to receptivity. We were talking earlier about how people can get in a condition where, as Jesus explained, they have a hardness of heart. This is what we want to eliminate. So literally, you try to make the mind pliable and receptive to change and transformation. So he's saying here, when one has gotten disgusted with undertakings and is adverse to the results of undertakings, that yogi, that one who seeks union, being disgusted with the world, instead of rejecting and saying, this world is nonsense, I just want to remove myself from it, he says, at that point you control the senses. You should hold the mind steady by the practice of meditation on the Atman. When the mind, in the act of being concentrated, begins immediately to wander and is unsteady, that being alert, that person should bring it within the control by following a conciliatory way, a specific designated way to control the mind. And literally, Sri Krishna goes on to say, he should not lose sight of the course of his mind, but holding his prana and sense organs in subjugation. This is again why people do Hatha Yoga and various things, because they can control their prana. They're not a slave to the movement of the energy of the body, they literally are masters of it. Because when you can master the energy flow in the body by retention of different asanas and things of this, is just training so you can do it in the mind. Because thoughts are literally driven by prana. And we all say, well, the mind can get out of control and the mind can be so explosive at times. But if you can control the prana, you can slow down that velocity of thoughts. And this is the idea, to be steady and reflective. So he says, you're holding your prana and sense organs in subjugation. He should bring the mind under control by means of an intellect charged with sattva. Sattva is purity. The gunas, tamas, which is, sluggishness, ignorance, dullness. Rajasic, which is active and sometimes even violent. And sattva, which is pure and reflective. We're all a mixture of these things. Even in Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna says, even the gods, even the devas, are subject to the gunas. It's not only a human condition that at times we're at peace, at times we're agitated. It's all a mixture. So he's saying, but it's charged with sattva, so we do things to kind of promote this purity of heart and nature. This sort of control of the mind is spoken of as the highest yoga. Like the control of here's a very interesting thing. This highest yoga is described like controlling the mind and dealing with it as if it is an unruly horse, with the view of making it conform to a rider's wishes at every step. Very interesting, because Sri Krishna is saying not only does the mind exist and you must conquer it, it is like an unruly horse. And this is literally the description we see in the Bhagavad Gita, where you see that famous picture of Sri Krishna driving the chariot and Arjuna is behind, and there's 5 horses and Sri Krishna is holding the reins. This is a mystical interpretation. The 5 horses are the senses. The Lord is holding the reins, and we're letting the Lord drive the chariot, which is the body-mind complex. So these are the powers of the Atman. And so it's interesting, because when we try to contemplate the highest, that, even highest yoga, we say we are that and we just want to be still. The preparation for that is the Raja Yoga aspect of control, meditation, concentration, for the purpose of becoming steady in wisdom. This is the whole essence of chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita, the Stita Prajna. In the greatest misfortune, you're steady. In the greatest elation and joy and happiness and wealth, you're steady. Because life is just a turbulence of going back and forth between one and the other. And this is the Divine Mother Maya who does this. She does it to us for this purpose of making ourselves receptive to moksha. So what is the definition of moksha or liberation? Literally, the Buddhists, Sri Krishna, even in the Bible, they say the same thing. It is literally, moksha or liberation is described as the separation, the actual complete separation from pain. It doesn't mean going to a heaven, living in a blissful state. It means you no longer are susceptible to pain and suffering. So it shows that we have that makeup of divinity in us, but we suffer. And that's what obscures that vision. So, at this point, does anyone want to ask a question? Yes, please.
I remember some time back reading a book called The Man Who Tapped the Secrets of the Universe.
Yes.
And in this book, what he talks about is our ability to tune into the cosmic consciousness.
Right.
And once we're able to do that, then we can tap into all knowledge. This is exactly what you're telling us now.
Exactly right. You can call it cosmic consciousness or Christ consciousness. It is literally, if we get down to the most common terminology, it's an active, intuitive mind. It is literally heart-going mind. Sri Ramana Maharshi said, when we're dealing in the external world and our senses are actually perceiving and moving, that is what's called the outgoing mind. When the mind is withdrawn, it's the heart-going mind. And so that cosmic consciousness, that Christ consciousness, that divine seed is in the heart. So the yoga is to connect the mind and heart. This is why, if you read so many different scriptures, they'll say, devotion is the key. Devotion to God is the real key.